You know what? I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but I know Imran, you recently tweeted about this, but looks like a lot of people are now jumping on this whole idea of how these UFOs and aliens are just like demonic beings, kind of very, very close to our idea now, right? Our theory of this whole thing. Alhamdulillah, that's good.
Yeah, yeah, they're moving towards that. It seems like um, the whole a lot of I think a lot of Christians are speaking out about this now, which is swaying that type of narrative a little bit more. Uh, towards the sort of interdimensional entities as opposed to extraterrestrial. Abdul Kareem has joined as well. Perfect. Let me share this in a few places, guys. Sam, you guys start, Afak. If you guys want to carry on, let me just go and
Sure.
share this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
If
hey, fuck, how are you, man?
Alhamdulillah, good man. How are you? I know it's been a while. To be honest, every week I just have something going on, so I couldn't even join in. I'm trying to keep up with the group chat, but oh man, that's it's too much. But
That's okay.
yes, sir.
So yeah, as you mentioned, that a lot of people start to notice the this idea of having interdimensional, especially that now it's like, come on, it came from the Congresswoman Anna Luna herself that she said it's, I would call it interdimensional, not aliens. She said it clearly like that. So
Yeah,
what?
exactly.
So what interdimensional other than you know angels, demons topics then,
So
especially.
true. But the
It's
weird part is I've seen a few pages
Mhm.
which they're freaking out that, oh my god, they're linking these beings to interdimensional or even like demonic beings. So I've seen a few posts where they're trying to dismiss that. They're saying, oh my god, this new administration is a religious fanatic people, they're trying to push like a religious agenda on this.
Well, either they like it or not. This is the truth.
Mhm.
So that this administration is pushing like biblical narratives for multiple directions.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And
but
actually, the disclosure plan was all made about creating a new religion. So, uh, oh, sorry, hold on. There was a very old movie, I think from the 40s, called "The Day the Earth Stood Still," and uh, this movie was black and white, and it came about aliens coming from spaceships, UFOs, but people decided to create a church for it, and they walked with Virgin Mary statues in the streets, greeting the UFOs, and so it seems that the idea of creating a religion out of the phenomena is something like they want to do. It's part of the plan. However, they don't really control the phenomena, so they can just piggyback it, just take the ride along. They cannot control it, but they can tell you, like, use the existence of the phenomena to create something completely, it could be even unrelated. They can tell you angels and demons, or demons only, or angels only mix the good aliens with the bad aliens as a deceptive move. That's very possible. Like, it seems that part of the religious endeavor that they're gonna do with the phenomena is the eminent, Otherwise, they could keep the EG hypothesis, because the jinn lie a lot, and they could keep the lie, the 80 years life ETs from other planets. But the shift happening, I think it seems to be on purpose. Otherwise, we could never hear about interdimensional quantum hypotheses about this. I have a quick question for Mr. Abu Salah Dean. You told me about that you have in your original like in your home countries or country of origin, the ideas of the jinn, the similar to ours, but I'd like to know more about it from the folklore of your country. And does it include also "don't whistle at night" warning?
Okay, so you want to know a little bit more about essentially the folklore and history of the jinn within the Caribbean.
Yep.
Okay, so
within the Caribbean, we call the jinn a number of different names. Um, so where I'm from, my family are from Jamaica. We primarily call them Doppy. But what's interesting is in Jamaica, somebody who's very smart but very tricky, we call them a jinner. So obviously, this is a legacy going back to the transatlantic slave industry with the Muslim slaves that would have been carried from West Africa to the Caribbean. They would have brought obviously Islam with them. They would have brought the belief of the jinn and so forth, and that would have manifested into the kind of hodgepodge of culture that was brought out of slavery. When you talk about the island of Grenada, which is a smaller island in the West Indies, they call the jinn there by two different names. One of them is called Lada Bless. The other one is Laga'u. Laga'u, I believe, is a corrupted Spanish of Al-Ghul, which is Arabic for, meaning the ghost or the jinn kind of thing. And there are many different stories around how the jinn manifest differently within the West Indies. Sometimes they will manifest as very beautiful women, where they try to seduce men to sleep with them. They can manifest of balls of light that literally will appear in the tropical rainforest. They will come down from the canopy of the rainforest, and people will see them run away. They sometimes chase people. Also, as well, a lot of the time, because the Caribbean is, has the Caribbean Sea, people will see balls of light either coming out of the water or going into the water as well. What you also have a lot as well is obviously because of the transatlantic slave industry, there's a lot of um, different, I would say, indigenous kind of spirituality that kind of got mixed in with Christianity and with the remnants of Islam. So you will get people say, don't go out late at night because if you go into the jungle, that's when the doppy can get you. Superstitions about being around graveyards, that type of thing. So a lot of the ways that you're going to find there will be a cultural similarities between the West Indies and particularly between, I would say, much of probably the Muslim world as well, on how the jinn manifest, different forms, how they trick people. Um, I think it's in the island of Trinidad. There's a particular type of jinn there that likes to essentially to make bargains with people, and then it will let you down at the last minute. Obviously, as well, there's a lot of what we call obia, which is basically a Caribbean word for seher or magic. A lot of that goes on. Probably the island out of all of them in the Caribbean is going to be the island of Haiti. Haiti is well known for a lot of magic, witchcraft. Even in the island of Haiti, they believe in the phenomena of what we would call zombies. But this seems to be more an ability to do with maybe chemical suppression. So mixing up potions, maybe naturally occurring stuff, giving it to people, and they have an inability to move. But like I say, there is within the Caribbean, there's different traditions, but essentially the jinn or how the local people understand the jinn is always in a negative. It is never in a positive.
That's very interesting.
Fascinating.
Wow. The
Yeah,
bargaining
absolutely.
one is like the Baba Legba mythology. And when you mentioned someone who's smart but tricky, I'm sorry, Imran, wanted to mention this because in the Arabic language, when someone is super smart, that's where we call him Abqari, which leads to the valley of Abkar in the Arabian Peninsula, where poets used to go there to channel the poetry from the entities, from the jinn. And in return, the word genius is coming also from the same from the same root of the genies, which means the same thing when someone who's super smart, but also you have to be wary of them.
Yeah, absolutely. You're probably going to find as well, because obviously the Caribbean is very, very close to the Americas. One of the areas in the Americas where you find there is a lot of what I would call jinn activity, seher, and magic, is particularly to the southern states of America. So you're talking about what we would see as the old slave areas of Georgia, Mississippi, those areas. New Orleans. New Orleans is an area that is infamous for the seher, jinn, and stuff that goes on there. So it seems to be more to the southern areas of America, not so much the northern areas.
Yes, very interesting stuff, and one of the things you've been looking into, bro, is the the cross-cultural experience of these entities or these beings, and I think that's one of the things we can get into. Just want to say welcome to Stone, Laurie, Wallace, MTK, Joe, Terminal. Thank you for coming on, guys. If you guys want to jump on, share your experiences, your thoughts on NHI, on Trump's disclosure, whatever the case is, just send us an invite, a request, and we will approve it. But yeah, Sam, there's so many places we can go with this discussion. What do you guys think? What will be the first thing we should get into? Any suggestions?
Well, so we have the most things now I think that could be connected to each other is the upcoming disclosure announcements that everyone's talking about, along with the disappearing scientists that people has maybe have relation with this. The American president, of course, came a few days ago and he says there is no connection. But I learned something that whenever the American presidents say something, especially this one, always check the opposite of it. I've learned this, and he's a liar. So when he says it's not connected, I assume it is. But when most people notice that he acts as if he's skeptical for the phenomena, he doesn't say what he thinks, but he says, I met great people, handsome people, and all these stuff. But then he starts to act like he doesn't believe in the idea of UFOs, even though he claims to be a very spiritual person, trying to bring religion back to to America and these stuff. I bet he's taking he thinks that, oh, I know what it is, and there are reasons, I believe, from what I've seen, some of what people call abduction marks. Some of them look like sigils, some looks like dots, three dots causing a triangle and stuff like that. I've seen in some part what looked like abduction books. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the president of the United States is an experiencer himself, and that's why he knows what is it. Because most people who don't know the phenomena or didn't experience it, most of them think it's all about UFOs, but and like ETs and technology. But once you're an experiencer, that's where people get a bit confused between both spiritual and technological. But eventually, they all go to the new age side and the spiritual side of things than the technological.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and Trump's an interesting guy. He's made many claims, and some people are even doubting whether he was actually, whether this disclosure, so-called disclosure, is actually going to happen, and even if it happens, what's going to be disclosed. What's your thoughts, Abu Salahuddin? What do you think, bro?
I think number one, just kind of like the research sort of been doing myself, is I think we have to be very, very careful that there is a lot of disinformation around either disclosure or understanding the phenomena as it is. I'll give you a really, really good example of exactly what I'm talking about. There was a film that came out, I think it was either late last year or early this year, and I think it was called Moment of Contact by the director James Fox. I don't know if everybody's seen it or heard of the film.
Yep.
Okay. what's very interesting about that particular story, it's just for those who are unaware, it's about the case in Virginia in Brazil. I believe it was in 1983, that essentially allegedly two alien beings were seen and captured by the Brazilian military. James Fox has done a very good film. It is interesting. But what is more interesting is the parts that he left out about Virginia in Brazil. For example, he leaves out that the town is well known for a lot of occult activity preceding the alleged capture of these two alien beings. During the I believe, the 50s and 60s, there was a very high profile occultist in Virginia that was summoning up entities in his basement, that was also, I would say, playing around with genetic engineering of dogs. Apparently, there's a particular breed of dog that he's well known for creating in Brazil. What's interesting is where the three girls say that they saw this alien entity is literally across the road from where this very high level occultist was summoning up entities in his basement. Now, there was also a Brazilian journalist that did an investigation into the Virginia case. But what is very interesting is that his hotel room was raided while he was in Virginia to do an investigation. Left on his bed was magical sigils. Now, what these sigils exactly meant, not too sure, but it would seem likely that these magical sigils essentially are you could say maybe a homing beacon, tracking device for these entities to know who to target, when to target them. Essentially, you are now on the list of what we need to target. So for me, I think we have to be very, very careful of the information that comes out, not just from the American government on disclosure, but the information that comes out from the so-called people that are meant to be investigating the phenomena as well, because they are very selective on what they report and what they don't report.
That's true. I heard that they use it as an anchor, the sigils, to anchor the phenomena. It's because sometimes the phenomena can do mistakes, and it's known that because they kind of it's known that Chris Bledsoe, for once, I'm not so sure if it was James Fox or someone else, someone had no came to contact with Chris Bledsoe and asked him for a healing miracle for his daughter, and he requested bring me a piece of her clothes and a piece of her hair, which is known for sihr and magic people to do, but could be like targeting DNA to pinpoint the person. And that's where, as per what I heard from people who've been into the occult or looked into it, it's almost like they draw the sigil on an item, and then they would sniff the person, and some of these people targeted would get burn marks or marks on their skin, looks exactly like the same sigil on the item to anchor them together. And that's why sometimes the phenomena can attack family members, not the actual person that they are supposedly targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. It would seem as though that the phenomena, the jinn, to use the wording from Jamaica, the doppy, they use this as like a homing beacon, that it singles you out from everybody else. What's also been notable as well is a lot of people have said that even within homes where paranormal activity has occurred, if an item is taken out of the home and taken to somewhere else, the phenomena seems to follow into that home as well. So it's kind of like it's a very broad brush of this is the house, target it. But when you're getting sigils predominantly put onto maybe your car or your bed where you sleep, it seems that is a very personal attack, that you as an individual are being targeted rather than the generality of the house.
It's very interesting, man. So these sigils, when you guys are referring to these sigils, how would you define them? Are they like, again, like Sam said, just tracking a type of a tracking beacon, which also, I guess, in a sense, exposes the limits of these NHI or these entities, whether you call them jinn or whatever you refer to them as. But how would you define them? What is a sigil?
Well, essentially, it could be, say, for example, a way of writing a magical spell. So let's say this is a very, very famous one. If anybody knows about the very famous rock band Led Zeppelin, if you look at the front covers, a lot of their albums, they have symbolism on their front album covers. These are magical sigils. The sigil could be something like, and this is a very well-known one, it's been documented. You maybe want to send the phenomena after an individual. So what you would do, you potentially would write their name, but you would mirror the name. So it doesn't read the name exactly, it's mirrored. So that kind of turns into a sigil that you would put on an item or something close to them. Like I say, this is also something as well that is in the Kabbalah. There is the very famous story about the rabbis from Vienna. I believe it was in the 17th century, that they created what was called a golem. So for those of you who have, seen Lord of the Rings, you know the story of Gollum. It's actually pronounced golem. A golem is an inanimate kind of being created from clay, that a sigil is placed on it, that is a magical sigil that brings it to life. And essentially it has to do the bidding of the person who brought it into existence. But obviously, we would see it more from an Islamic perspective, that this would be kind of like a homing beacon for the phenomena to inhabit that particular clay object that was made. This is something that was seen in the very famous skull experiments. So for those of you who, perhaps you've never heard of it, the skull experiments was a series of experiments that were conducted in I believe it was the 1990s, the early 90s to the mid 90s, at Skull Village in the UK. The whole basis of the experiment was to prove life after death. It ended up proving something a lot more. But one of the things that the phenomena would do is it would then manifest, but it would manifest into inanimate objects. So what's very interesting, that one of the experiments they did, they said the phenomena manifested as what we would call a light orb, but then it went into a vase, and somehow it was able to affect the vase on a molecular level, that the vase lost all cohesion and people couldn't pick it up. And then the entity departed from it, and it seemed to reconfigure and have its substance to it.
Well, now that you've opened up the can of skull experiment, it's actually a fascinating event that took place back in the day. And maybe you want to give a bit more details on that and how it actually relates to, because I know it's more, people will be thinking of this more in line with the sort of black magic occult practices, summoning rituals, but how it may link to the whole UAP phenomenon. I think there's a very interesting links there, not just one.
Yeah, the skull experiment, I found out about it a couple of months ago. It is such an interesting case study that does link in with the UAP and the NHI phenomena. So as I say, it began as a study to prove life after death. Very rapidly, it expanded on more from that. Now, there's an interesting book you can buy. I would highly recommend everybody read it. There's also a very good documentary on YouTube. Just type in the Skull Experiment on YouTube. There's about an hour-long documentary, very good. And one of the things the phenomena was doing in the Skull experiments, it wasn't just, you could say, masquerading as the dead. It then began, we would say, manifesting as balls of light. It manifested as miniature aircraft, but probably the one that is of most interest for those of us investigating the UAP NHI phenomena is the phenomena manifested as miniature UFOs, and literally would go from a ball of light into a miniature UFO that would fly around the room. And this is documented in the documentary, in the book, and in the many interviews that took place with the scientists who participated in these series of studies. Probably the most interesting aspect of the Skull experiment is the scientists, because it was all scientist based, so it was scientifically tested, validated, verified. One of the things a scientist asked the phenomena is, could we film you? So then apparently, now this is interesting, and this is where it shows we have to be careful with so-called spirit guides. So the scientists kind of had an intermediary that they said they had like a spirit guide that was in communication with the other spirits. So the spirit guides said, well, if you want to film the phenomena, you have to do this. And if you watch the documentary, they go into detail. What is interesting is one day they filmed essentially in the room where the experiments were done, and nothing appeared on camera. But when they played them back, you had the phenomena manifesting as an alien gray that they called blue.
I put the picture
Now remember,
here. I just put.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I just put it now.
Yeah, brilliant. So we have to remember the Skull experiment was about proving life after death, but instead it's being used by the phenomena, as I say, to manifest as miniature UFOs and to manifest as the typical alien gray. So it just goes to show that this is, and I think this is one of the letdowns of those of us who are investigating this common phenomena. We either investigate it from the perspective of the paranormal, or we investigate it from the perspective of UAP NHI, or we investigate it from the perspective of cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. What we have to understand is that we have to have more of an interconnectivity, because what we begin to see very, very rapidly, that this whole topic is not rather different topics. It is one topic, and essentially it's manifesting in very different ways. Bringing back to what we were saying, you know, the conversation we started earlier on, and then I'll jump off. When the phenomena manifests, it manifests according to what we would call in German the Zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. What is the preoccupation of people? In today's day and age, it's the belief in life in other planets. But if we was to go back, say, for example, 500 years ago in England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, what was the kind of spirit entities that people feared, that people were worried about, and seems to exhibit many of the commonalities of the alien phenomenon? Does anyone know what
The fairies.
500 years ago? What?
I have
Yeah.
I have friends here in UK. She's my workmate in my office.
She claims she's a witch who does Wicca. She believes in the fairies, but she fears them even though she's a witch. She says, I would never go a place that I know that fairies been there. Not like the
Yeah,
pixie dust of
exactly.
cartoons. No, they say in reality they are terrifying.
Yeah. What's very interesting is I have a very, very good friend of mine. He is Turkish British, born in the UK, Muslim. But yet, very interestingly, twice in his house, the phenomena has manifested as a goblin. Now, if anybody knows what a goblin looks like, very easy, you can go online and find a picture. So it seems as though, it will manifest. So if I was from the north of England, it may manifest as a fairy or what we would call a brownie or a goblin, and there are certain places, even today in Ireland, people will not go there if it has what they call a fairy circle. They have a belief you do not step into it, because if you step into the fairy circle, you can be abducted and taken off into the land or the realm of the fairies. So it's the like I say, rather than looking at the phenomena in three different aspects as paranormal, UAP, cryptid, we have to begin. It's the same phenomena, but as Jack Valley said, it's wearing different masks.
Yeah, no, absolutely, bro. And this is, it's a conclusion you are drawn to over and over again when you look at different aspects of these manifestations. Even if you just zone in on the whole UAP UFO phenomenon since 2017, especially since it's picked up, you study the cases, you study what goes on, what's experienced. It inevitably comes to the same point that this seems to be something manifesting in many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It just it goes according to the society. It maybe goes according to, wherever it is at that time in history. What is it people fear and how it reflects? That's how it manifests.
It's almost like an algorithm based on trends.
Yes, absolutely. It definitely does seem so.
When you
Yeah,
mentioned the
it's
golem, the first thing and saying they write certain incantations and make it do their biddings, the first thing I thought about was AI. Before you say that the phenomena would hijack the the robot, let's say, but they're stone robots.
I mean, what is very interesting, because at the moment I'm just investigating into uh, psychedelic drugs and the phenomena. What's interesting, there's a guy called Terence McKenna that he kind of is the real pioneer of DMT, which is, I think, is dimethyltryptamine. Can't quite remember the proper correct pronunciation for it. But when he was tripping, he was talking about he was seeing these things called machine elves that he could interact with, that were sentient and conscious and could speak to him. People have spoken about going into these DMT hallucinogenic psychedelic trips, and they encounter alien greys. They encounter beings that prophesize the future for them. They encounter beings that tell them where lost property is. So it seems to be just another area that the phenomena has found to essentially to beguile, to bemuse, and mislead humanity.
So interesting when you mentioned the fairy rings, they are usually made of mushrooms. And that was an interesting thing that fungi is a big thing in relation to the phenomena. I read someone, I'm trying to find this report. They're talking about people who get kicked out of the GMT realm. Someone figured out that the phenomena utilizes using DMT as a recruitment
Mm-hmm.
agency for people who would have first promote the ideas that comes during the trip, second promote tripping using DMT itself to spread the effect on people, which is as per Charles Upton, the perennialistic researcher, He's also a Sufi Muslim. He said that this is one of the things that he believes could be thinning the veil, beside the nuclear experiment and the technology and the all the mess up that humans are doing, that psychedelic experimentations and recreational use is actually increasing the, how we say talk about the jinn and brings more jinn. So you talk about psychedelics and and what you see in there, they really manifest. It brings them the ability to manifest easier over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can go back, what's interesting, just doing some research into this, and I think, there's a lot more scope to be opened here. And that is just how far back in history does the phenomena influence humanity? At the moment, I'm doing some background research into the beliefs of the indigenous Aborigines of Australia. Now, there's a place in Kimberley that is well known for cave art that was created there round about 5,000 years ago. That is essentially, it's believed by the Aboriginal people that these spirit beings came down from the sky, they created humanity, they created the land. These pictographs that the indigenous peoples of Australia have created look exactly like alien greys. So this alien grey kind of archetype definitely seems to be something very predominant throughout human history. You have it in Australia, you have it in other parts of the world. What kind of was very interesting is that the name that the Aboriginal people give these sky entities that they believe brought them into existence, they call them the Wajinna. Wajinna. I think the name tells it all exactly what these entities were.
Yeah, man, the connections just seem to get deeper and deeper. I mean, it's in the name itself. What's the etymological uh, history behind that particular word? Like, how would it does it come from the Arabic uh, linking to
No,
the jinn?
it comes from three of the local Aboriginal tribes in the Kimberley area. So it's kind of to their particular language. But to me, it sounds very highly likely that some time in history, around about 5,000 years ago, the entity, the jinn, manifested to these people and was very open and cool and said, we are jinn. And for whatever reason, the Aboriginal people called them the Wajinna, the sky spirits, whatever. So the actual name is it's known to three of the Aboriginal tribes, but as to is it a word that was indigenous to them, or did the entities call themselves, we are the Wajinna?
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I know you've been looking into some of these cave drawings and paintings, and I guess that the second part of the title in regards to plasma beings, I think maybe we can it's a nice little segue here to touch upon that point as well. The link with plasma. You've been looking into that, especially in relation to cave drawings. You sent me a video, bro, a few days ago, about 2 weeks ago, a week ago,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was very interesting.
it's really fascinating. Essentially, I believe he is a theoretical physicist. His name's Dr. Andre Petit, I believe. Um, he was shown some examples of pictographs that are across the globe. They are in America, they are in mainland Europe, they are in Saudi Arabia, they are in the United Arab Emirates, and they all have a commonality. They are called a squatting man. Now, what this particular physicist said, and he's looked at a lot of these pictographs, that he said, well, what ancient man was doing was actually depicting plasma phenomena in different aspects of its manifestation. And he was able to prove through actual plasma experimentation within his laboratory that what these people were seeing, and he says, look, these people must have seen it in the sky, that some type of plasma phenomena took place, and they drew it in such a way that how they could understand it the way they could as it visually took place in the sky. There's a very interesting book on the subject. It's called Auras, Pictographs and Pagans by Jeff Ransom, where he goes into this link of these, what they are essentially being called plasma pictographs, and how they occur all over planet Earth through different times in history. See, some of them are actually going back 10,000 years ago, even earlier. And I think it just really does show that this phenomena that we call the jinn has been influencing humanity for potentially hundreds of thousands of years. But I would highly recommend, if anybody's interested, just go onto YouTube, type in plasma pictographs. There is an excellent documentary on there. And like I said, it really does shed some light on, the ancient influence that phenomena has had on humanity. And essentially, through a lot of it, the phenomena has set itself up as what I would call an object of deification, to be worshipped. And early humanity did worship this phenomena as a god, because it would have been able to do things, extraordinary things that human beings couldn't do. It could manifest into different shapes, forms, colors, seemingly, and this is something that links back to the coming of the Antichrist, that the Antichrist will seemingly be able to bring someone's loved ones back from the dead. But in reality, we've been told that this is shayateen jinn taking on the form of somebody's dead relatives. So if we think back maybe 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 years ago, the kind of how that could have affected early humanity, it's just amazing.
It is fascinating. We had Red Panda jump on. I think he's had some connection issues. He's gone off. It'll be good if we can get him back on to get his thoughts on, especially the Trump disclosure stuff that's going on currently. What's going to be made of that? But yeah, bro, this plasma link again. This is another thing which crops up across the spectrum of the phenomenon. Whether you're looking at Bigfoot research, whether you're looking at ancient, cave drawings and paintings, whether you're looking at even the UFO phenomenon itself. Today, there's a link to plasma. Many speculate that a lot of these objects in the sky are plasmoids or forms of plasma, intelligent plasma that's living, that's alive in some way, shape, or form. And there seems to, based on the research we're doing back end, and maybe you want to touch upon this, bro, that there definitely seems to be a link between plasma and the jinn itself. So it seems like another connecting or a point of contact that connects all of these different aspects or manifestations of the phenomenon.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think, first of all, we have to look at something within the Quran. And a lot of people will say, but the Quran explicitly says, the jinn are made of smoke as fire. Now, I think what we potentially have to look at is if the potentiality, and we're not saying 100%, the potentiality that the jinn are a plasma-based life form, then what we would say is the Quran, by calling it smoke as fire, is kind of using or putting a concept to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the society he's in, to conceptualize and understand something that perhaps there would not have been a word for. But what is interesting is if we look at these plasmoids that seem to manifest, and there's some very interesting studies that have been done. What's the commonality of these plasmoids? That they can potentially seem to reach very high temperatures. People that come into contact with these plasmoids have burns even if they're just looking at it. They can illuminate to very, very high illuminations. Essentially, these plasmoids exhibit a lot of the qualities of what we could call of normal fire. I mean, we use plasma welding to weld metal together, melting it, binding it together. So I think, number one, we have to see it from that perspective, that to potentially understand that the jinn or a plasma-based life form does not nullify the Quran, but rather we look at it from the perspective as is a God talking about something in what we would call a majazi? Is it metaphorical rather than being zahir, literal?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even the researcher you put me on again over a week ago, Jay Alfred, who I've been in correspondence with, and he sent some very interesting links and emails. He's also of the opinion that in his one of the articles that he writes on the jinn linked to plasma, he highlights that according to his research, that when it says smokeless fire, plasma is like a smokeless fire. There's no smoke to it. It doesn't come from combustion. And etymologically, when you do a deep dive into the Arabic root words for the word that's used to describe this fire, which is marriage, the meanings that come from that etymology, the etymological study, are literally in line with what we refer to as plasma today. The term itself plasma is a recent development. It's come about maybe over the past 100 years or so. So this thing that we call plasma, well, we know that it's energetic. It's something that's volatile. It's something that is constantly shifting and moving because of its atomic nature as well. And all of these ideas of something being energetic, free flowing, moving, something that's volatile, etc., are the same types of meanings that are found in the word marriage, the word itself that's used to describe the jinn or the fire that they are comprised of. So there's a very clear, strong correlation there as well. When you look at purely from a study of words and the meanings of words. So yeah, and that leads me, to also be in the camp that it seems like the jinn are or comprised of what we refer to as plasma today. Now, obviously, there's an added element here. There's plasma, and then there's the speculative space of, okay, what would you get if you have a conscious form or a living form of plasma? And that's an interesting point of discussion. How would these entities that comprise the plasma behave? What could they do? What would their potentialities be? How would they manifest? These are very interesting points. Anything else, bro, you want to share in regards to plasma and the link with plasma, maybe plasma and UAPs? Anything you've seen in regards to that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that I think a lot of people that are now, investigating the UAP phenomena is that there's now this question is, are we talking about this is nuts and bolts technology, or are we talking about something else? Because a lot of the time when people now are capturing the phenomena on camera, visibly it seems to morph into what we would call a typical flying saucer shape, but then it might form into literally an octagon, but then it might form into something else. So it seems as though, that historically it was always seen to be very nuts and bolts, but there seems to be very much of a change now, that where before the phenomena manifested as a triangular craft, or the very typical 1950s flying saucer, now it's morphing, it's changing. Why this is taking place, I don't know. This is maybe something to be investigated into a little bit more. But one of the qualities of plasma is it would have the ability to morph, to shape. And I would highly recommend, if anybody has an opportunity, there is a very interesting video on YouTube. If you type in plasma-based life forms, you'll probably come across an interesting lecture by a guy called Dr. Robert Temple. He's done an interesting book called The New Science of Heaven. But there is a case study that was done a couple of years ago from the International Space Station. And it was with a experiment they did with a satellite on a long tether. The tether lost connectivity to the International Space Station, but what they noticed is that they had these plasmoids that swarmed the tether. I think it was something, the tether itself was like 12 miles long. And there was actually a really good study that has been written by some university professors. I can't remember the name exactly right now. Hopefully maybe we could post the actual link in, but they did like a 30-page report into the feasibility and the possibility of plasma-based life forms. And one of the cases that they actually cite as evidence for plasma-based life forms is the incident that happened around the International Space Station. And even they have now very interestingly began to look at what we commonly call ball lightning, because one of the things they talk about ball lightning is it seems to recognize on a level of sentience, i.e., if there's a tree, it will go around a tree. People have spoken about manifestations of ball lightning in their house that literally will go up the stairs, come down the stairs, and go back out the window. For something that is brainless, stupid, it seems to show a lot of intelligence to go up a flight of stairs, come down a flight of stairs, and go back out a window. So it's a really, I think now, and this is one of the things I'd say for us as Muslims, that we should take exceptional pride in, and I say that unashamedly, is that now modern science is catching up with what essentially what as Muslims we've known for 1400 years. That number one, that there is another sentient life on planet Earth. It exists and it does interact with us sometimes. It has, and as the Quran says, it is able to see us, but we cannot see it. But we know it exists because the Quran is the truth of its existence.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. And you know, these parallels are beyond coincidence, I would say. You know, and like you were mentioning the history before, bro, there's some things we can speak in definitive terms about, right? So a couple of things, let's just list them out. Or at least one key thing is that there has been a, as it's called today, NHI, non-human intelligence, an interaction with this intelligence throughout history. It's been experienced cross-culturally throughout time, in every age. The other thing we could say is that it has manifested. So one, there's an assumption that it has the ability to manifest or take on forms, and it's manifested in ways which were relevant to those societies, the zeitgeist, as you mentioned, of the times. You know, and you can go way back. You know, it goes all the way back in history. And what seems like the case, if you're connecting the dots and if you know your history, is that we're once again witnessing the same non-human intelligence manifesting once again in the 21st century, but taking on a particular form, which one could argue is more appealing or palatable to the modern techno-secular mind. I mean, you know, technology is what's considered to be the defining thing for today's society. It's something we look up to, something we aspire to get more of, etc. So what would you say in regards to that, bro? How would that the manifestation of this NHI as extraterrestrial beings, because on the surface that's what it seems to be displaying itself as, how does that link to today's society?
I think it links because today's modern society is very, you know, technologically driven, scientifically driven, you know, and essentially, unfortunately, and I think this is a very sad element, that now, you know, science supposedly has now proven God does not exist, and rather Darwin's theory of evolution now proves that, you know, essentially man just popped out of nowhere, developed, and we are where we are today. So obviously, perhaps a couple of hundred years ago, the phenomena would have manifested more in the likes of what we would call the obvious archetypal image of a demon, horns, fangs, and that kind of thing, to scare people, to seek protection in what we would be false religious icons, false manifestations of Jesus, false manifestations of the Virgin Mary, that kind of thing. Whereas today, we live in a society, and we should talk about the West as post-Christian. I know that now that there's like very much an attempt to revive Christianity as the dominant faith within the West, but really we have to talk about the West as being post-Christian now, and it is now very science. So that's why now I think the phenomena is taking on the idea of a technologically advanced civilization, because that's where we are at the moment. It's about technology, it's about what we can prove and so forth. But yes, what's very interesting is, this phenomena that we are told is coming billions of light years to planet Earth, but yet then seemingly, collides with aircraft and crashes, or collides with this and crashes, but yet it's able to navigate billions of miles to planet Earth, which seems a bit of an oxymoron. You come all the way to Earth and then you collide, with a missile. Well, how's a missile going to hurt you? You're supposed to be a technologically advanced civilization. So I think really that's what it is. The phenomena has now seen, God has now, metaphorically departed the scene in the West. Science, technology is now the God. So we will now use that and manipulate that.
Yeah, and on the surface it does work, but like you mentioned there, if you really pay attention, there's some telltale signs that it's not really highly advanced, extraterrestrial entities or beings from a distant star system that are visiting us, because like you said, the flaws, they wouldn't be colliding into X, Y, Z, crashing on Earth necessarily so easily in many cases. Valet, I think, mentions 4 distinct points in one of his papers in regards to why it just doesn't make sense that these could be extraterrestrial entities or beings, but instead it seems like it's something else masking or masquerading as extraterrestrial entities. But on the surface, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, look, like you said, bro, we live in a techno-secular age driven by science. That is the God in some sense of today. And if something can appear that's far more advanced when it comes to technology and science, well, then we'll naturally look up to these beings or these entities and be in awe of them. And especially alongside that, when you're getting some of these subtle ideas which are being suggested that they seeded us or they created us or they tinkered with the genome, implying that they are our creators, our gods. So it seems to be this phenomenon is trying to occupy the same space in the minds of human beings as it has been throughout history, which is to occupy the space of a god or a being or entity that is to be worshipped, that is to be submitted to. But I guess we need to pay a bit more attention because people can easily fall into that. But there are telltale signs. There are things that don't add up. Even James Lukatsky, in one of his recent podcasts, mentioned that there are people focus on the nuts and bolts, and you would expect the governments to do that because that's what's of interest. Is the technology. Let's get our hands on this supreme technology, which will give us an advantage over other nations. But as he mentions, when you study these cases, it's not only nuts and bolts. There are different aspects to this phenomenon. He refers to it as the paranormal aspect. So there's a paranormal dimension to this phenomenon and its experience. And he even goes as far as saying that that's the area we need to be looking into more so than the nuts and bolts if we were to really understand what's going on. And I guess that's one of the things that IREP and is trying to do here. But I see we have loads of guests. It'll be really good to get some insights from you guys as well. Thank you for joining. If you just request the mic, we'll be more than happy to give it to you guys and just get your take on the whole topic. Sam, you've been quiet, man.
Just to add to something that you just said, brother Imran. it's very interesting that J. Allen Hynek is seen as essentially being, kind of the godfather of the kind of investigation into the whole, UAP, UFO phenomena. He was someone who essentially went into it an atheist and then came out the other end having a real belief that these things were happening. But yet, what they don't tell you about J. Allen Hynek is when he was putting together his reports on the UAP phenomena, that he deliberately suppressed all of the reports that showed often that there was paranormal activity leading up to people either seeing craft or seeing entities, and there was paranormal activity after seeing craft or seeing entities. We know from his, I believe it's his son, that later on in life, Alan Hynek became very spiritual to the point that he ended up verging into becoming a follower of the Rosicrucian movement, which is kind of like a very traditional Western, I would call occult esoteric group. And even his funeral was according to Rosicrucian rites. So a lot of these guys at the very top realize that this phenomena has transcended nuts and bolts, computer chips and microchips, and we are now essentially looking at, and the clues and the answers are in the spiritual.
Absolutely, man. Even D.W. Pasoka, one of the sort of leading academic writers on this topic, she has a new book coming out, I believe, in the next month or so, um, where she has also been on a similar journey. Initially, she was very skeptical. She denied the whole thing, very atheist about it. And now she not only acknowledges that this is a real phenomenon, but that it's something that is most likely more spiritual than the nuts and bolts or paranormal. Um, and we see this type of realization, people arrive at this eventually. People that seriously study the topic are reaching similar conclusions. And I think one thing that people need to do is, and I know it's hard because we are conditioned, we live in a certain worldview. It shapes our minds and our reality and the way we see the world and what we believe. And it's very hard to acknowledge in the times that we live in paranormal realities or supernatural realities or spiritual realities. But if you really objectively take a good look at the phenomenon, it does point you in that direction. So yeah, it's very interesting, man. Sam, you want to chime in, bro? You've been quiet for a while, or Afak on the IREP.
Yeah, I was just trying to grab links for the topics we've been talking about. Let me see, was something I wanted to comment.
Brilliant, bro. So yeah, thank you guys for jumping on. Sally, Stoned, SWAT, M, Sarah, William B, White, E.T., Asad, Castiofi. I can't say that word. Sorry, I'm dyslexic. I'm struggling with that one. Dustban, Blank, Joe, Hamza, Terminal, and everyone else. Yeah, jump on, guys. If you want to chime in and just share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. We want to make it more of a discussion, get everyone else's thoughts and opinions and perspectives. It will only enrich the whole discussion. So yeah, Abu Salahuddin, bro. There's so many areas we can verge off on this topic. Anything else we want to sort of highlight or bring into this discussion? I know we're going to talk about, maybe we'll shift over to the discussion of the disappearing scientists. That's been popping up a lot recently, that there's been several scientists that have gone just missing or died
Yeah.
under strange circumstances. So anyone that wants to chime in on that?
I actually do want to know more about it. So if you guys know like a lot of the information, please share, because I know there's one lady. She did talk about the one of the missing scientists, right? If you watch her video, she's talking about the plasma beings and some other stuff, right? And I was curious, I'm trying to learn more about it, but it's just so confusing because there are, I think, 6, 7 scientists that went missing.
Yeah, one of them was known that, like, maybe one of the first ones was called Amy Eskridge, which was already talking about scientists are being hunted She was talking about gravity, plasma, quantum physics, and they say that she was working with NASA at some point, and she was giving some warning, like only surfaced recently a private message that she was saying that something upcoming soonish, maybe at October 2026 or 2027. And most of these people were found. Many of them were working even with Lockheed Martin, which is one of the biggest companies that seems to be working with reverse engineering. And they are found, like, well, actually not found, when they disappeared. Most of them didn't have their weapons, didn't have their phones on them, like as if they were completely snatched from their place. Of course they wouldn't say that. They assumed that the person left the house and never showed up again. It's pretty interesting. I was one of the aside from that, I was say notice something. We talk about the phenomena's disclosure between two things that seems to be the materialistic aspect and the spiritual aspect. Well, from disclosure standpoint, when people looks at higher beings with technology, like higher technology, and from the that's for the phenomena have many cards to cover everyone with its different archetypes, seems like, regardless of the shape. So we have the spiritual people who think about it as spiritual phenomena, ancestors, angels, gods, and we have the atheist people will see it as aliens from other beings, because you can see on the internet many videos that will tell you, like, Yahweh was just an alien being, or from a different world. It means from a different planet. It doesn't matter how it works, because they will try to move things into what seems like the Hindu cosmology of things, seeing life as a cycle, time as a cycle, that these beings don't live at the same time space that we share in, or see it from a different perspective. That's why they mix and match and mash up all the different hypotheses together. See, from my perspective, I can see it as the phenomenon is trying to get audience as much as possible. They just want you to link with it. If you would look for a craft using an application for C5, if you'll go for meditation, if you'll go take some psychedelics, just the phenomena is hungry for human contact. And from my perspective, and as we know that the jinn is more like from the spiritual perspective, I think that the what people talk about UFO invasion could be more of like genification of human mentality and human psyche, like a mental invasion that will make almost everyone connected to the phenomena, to some being. Because when you look on the internet, most experiencers, not all of them but most of them, whoever have a specific beings, they always have one entity that's always, your body, the one that you always meet, and he can introduce you to more, but usually there is one specific being for every human. But then, of course, the more you serve them and the more you do work with them, the more will come and get attracted to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Well,
think so.
yeah,
Go on, bro.
I was just gonna say, because we know that human beings have an intimate companion, and it mentions in Islamic texts, that is the Quran. Your Quran is with you every single day of your life. It is with you when you was born. It is with you when you die. And it kind of, when we understand it from that perspective, we can see now how people then, can get very tricked into these seances and stuff like that, where they say, well, my father has spoken to me from beyond the grave. It's no, you're not. Your father has spoken to you from beyond the grave. Your father's Quran has spoken to the medium's Quran that you are visiting, and that's why it knows all the intimacies of your family, because it was there when you had your birthday parties and your good times and your bad times with your family, because your Quran was there to observe. It was there to, as we would say, waswas, to whisper, to misguide. And that's what it is. I had a very, very good friend of mine, brother Shah Rahimullah. He died a couple of years ago. Alhamdulillah, he was the person responsible for giving me dawah, bringing me to the deen, alhamdulillah. But his mum, who wasn't Muslim, used to go to mediums. And he said to her one day, to his mum, he said, well, when you go to see this medium, ask her, about her jinn that she uses. Um, and when his mum went to the medium and said to her, oh, my son asked me to say to you, what's the name of the jinn, or what's the jinn that you interact with? The woman was shocked. She was like, well, how do you know about that? Where do you know about jinn and stuff like that? So, it's there to be seen. And I would say to anybody, and this is something unfortunately I've seen from, investigators into the phenomena, that they will investigate from the perspective of Judeo-Christian, indigenous spirituality, New Age spirituality, but yet there's not enough open-mindedness for them to investigate from an Islamic perspective. What does Islam say about the phenomena? And I think that's probably the part that I've been very disappointed with, that is a lot of the leading individuals investigating the phenomena essentially do not want to interact with Muslims or to discuss with Muslims. And the first thing that my journalistic training tells me is, what do Muslims know that you don't want to talk to them about, but rather you'd avoid talking to them?
Yeah, and I would even say some actually have looked into it, but then been discouraged to continue looking into it or speaking about it. So Jim Simivan, for example, I'm sure many people are aware of here, who was an ex-CIA agent. Uh, in some of his public podcasts originally, he actually was quite explicit about what he believes these NHI are, and he referred to them as jinn, and he discussed it in some detail. However, in later interviews, he refrained from using that term, and even mentioned, I believe, in one place that he's not allowed to go into the specifics of it. Um, we see this discouragement even with Gordon Crichton back in the day. Crichton was, a British diplomat, a very intelligent man, knew a polyglot, knew many languages, traveled the world, spent time in Saudi in the Middle East, had Muslim friends from maybe his work and his duties. He was also the chief editor of the Flying Saucer Review magazine back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, I believe. And he, in the mid to early 80s, went public with his hypotheses, and he I mean, I have the first copy of one of the probably the first copies of when he actually published his article on the jinn, and he actually explicitly said that from all of his research, he believes that these beings are what are referred to as jinn in the Islamic tradition. But he got a lot of ridicule for it. He got a lot of backlash, and in later interviews, is apparent. There's a video interview on YouTube of him where he once again goes into his hypotheses about the jinn, but is very cautious and prefaces it by saying that, look, no, I'm not saying this because I'm associated with Islam or Muslims in any way or in favor of Islam, but, and then he proceeds to, make his claim. So I think some don't look into it, some do look into it and are aware, but they are discouraged from speaking about it. As you know, bro, since you've been, trying to engage with people, the insiders on this topic, you get closed doors. They don't respond to you. They may respond to you initially and then completely disappear. We've had that experience several times, me, Farouk as well. So they're definitely, from countless experiences, there seems to be a deliberate discouragement of engaging with Muslims on this topic. And I don't know exactly why. Some of the reasons are probably apparent, that we're discussing right now. Maybe because it opens the doors to acknowledging that this stuff is not solely, physical nuts and bolts. There's more to it. And yeah, sure, we're using the term jinn right now, and that's the term we use to refer to these NHI. However, they've been around many cultures, many civilizations. They've been called different things. So if it's an issue with the name, don't use the term. But let's discuss what these entities are. That's the key thing here. And I think the more you look into this topic, the UFO, NHI, UAP, and more broader related topics like Bigfoot, cryptids, and other such phenomena, the Mothman, and so on and so forth, it becomes apparent that we're dealing with the same entities, which many cultures, many religions have spoken about in the past. We call them, from an Islamic perspective, the jinn. And there's a lot of information in these traditions about these entities and beings that, even if one was to just study it historically, approach these religious texts historically, they will glean a lot of information about these NHI, which could be very helpful. And just one more point before I move back onto you, Roy. I think something else that's quite apparent, that from just studying the phenomenon, putting aside what it is what it wants to achieve. And I think that's becoming more and more apparent. Throughout history and even now today, 21st century, it seems like it always presents itself as a superior entity or a superior being, far more superior than the humans it's interacting with at any given time in history. And then if you ask the question, well, why? I mean, if you think about it, some of the best of technology today, fighter jets, right? You can claim are some of that technology. This phenomenon is running circles around the best technology that we have today. What's that going to do psychologically? It's going to create a state of awe. It's going to create a state of just, absolute awe within people. They're going to look up to it. They're going to want to know about it. If you look at some of CE5 and these other protocols, people are almost, you can say it's a type of worship, or an appeasing of this phenomenon to get it to manifest. And then it may give things to people. Like in the case of Chris Bledsoe, it healed him from his conditions. Now, if you look at that purely from an individual, personal perspective, if a phenomenon is healing you, the natural psychological disposition is going to be to acknowledge it as something good, right? That's naturally the way the mind works. Okay, this thing helped me, therefore it must be good. Not necessarily. It may have helped you because there's an end game in mind. And for you, it wants you to be in a state of awe, and it wants you to have that mindset or that belief that this is good because it wants to achieve something. So I think there's many things we can tell by just studying the way it's interacting with people. But anyway, I've spoken a lot. Let's go back to Abu Salahuddin, bro. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, just very quickly, just to what you were talking about Chris Bledsoe, and then related back to actually an earlier case. One of the things about Bledsoe that doesn't come out, but he kind of mentioned it, his initial interaction with these entities, is essentially they threatened him and said, well, if you do what we tell you to do, you'll be okay and your family will be okay. Well, if these are supposed to be some kind of enlightened spiritual entities, why are they threatening him? Why are they threatening his family and saying, well, if you don't do what we tell you, potentially we could hurt, harm, kill, your family members? And I think a lot of people, they don't, there's this kind of like this imaginative tale that is being weaved of, well, everything to do with the NHI is positive and it's brilliant. Well, what about the people who have negative interactions with the NHI? There is a very well-known investigator into the phenomena that he says that when he was 6 or 7, this phenomena was manifesting in his bedroom and was frightening him to death, was manifesting as an alien grey and was prodding him and poking him. And while he's sitting there crying and very fearful, that doesn't sound like a positive interaction to me. And I think, is it Stephen Greer that says, oh, well, all of the NIHA are good. If you have a bad experience, that's because you're a bad person. The absurdity to say to a 7-year-old child that is being plagued night after night by this NHI, you're going to say that they are a bad child and they deserve to have this bad experience with the NHI? I don't think so. But kind of like reference it back, and I think this is something to look at, is the phenomena. When you start getting a little too close to understanding the reality of it, potentially it will take action against you. There's a very interesting case of a guy called Albert K. Bender. He was one of the earliest investigators into the UAP phenomena, founded one of the earliest magazines into it. And he writes, later on in life that essentially that he was attacked in his home by what we would now call today the archetype of the Men in Black. The difference is the Men in Black that he was threatened by were floating off of the air, in the air, with piercing red eyes, basically telling him, you're getting too close. If you don't stop, we are going to hurt you. We're going to kill you. The phenomena at that time showed it had an ability to manipulate the phone system. So that essentially it was calling him through the phone system. It was manifesting before him. So it goes to show this phenomena when you do get a little too close to the truth, or even partially revealing the truth, potentially it can take action against you. I know personally myself, and this is my own experience. I'm speaking myself. This is not secondhand. This is my experience. So this goes back to actually to nearly 20 years ago when I met who is now my wife now. So at the time, I think my wife at the time, she'd recently came back from the West Indies, didn't have a mobile phone. I just bought her a mobile phone. So we had arranged to meet to go for dinner. I got a phone call in the middle of the day saying, hi, Abdul Kareem, can't make it. Sorry about that. And I thought, there was just something that said, this is strange. But I met her at the pre-arranged meeting point and I said to her, oh, I got your message earlier on today. And she said, what message? I said, you called me. She said, never called you. I said, yeah, you left a message to say that you wouldn't be able to make it along and you couldn't come. Never called you, never left a message. So this phenomena does seem to hold an ability to manipulate technology. How they do it, it's beyond me, but they do it. And like I say, if you do get a little bit too close, they will plague you and potentially they can harm you. And we have to ask the question, a lot of these scientists that have gone missing, is it that essentially, like the fairies and like the jinn, have these people been abducted? We don't know.
Yeah, man, absolutely. There's so many possibilities, and like you've mentioned, and you've had many other experiences as well since you've been researching this topic. A lot of people that seem to sort of start connecting the dots, start being troubled a lot as well by what these things are. You also mentioned, bro, the even prior to 2017 and the whole UFO UAP topic blowing up, there was other manifestations in recent history, like the Nine, that were contacting, many people, many leading figures. Uri Geller was one of them, under Purwich, I think, Dr. Purwich, which is supervision, and others. So maybe you want to share some stuff in regards to that. I'm sure some people may have come across the Nine. Today, the Lady is very popular. That's quite big in the whole UFO discourse. But yeah, any links with the Nine and the Lady and their message, and the whole UFO UAP topic?
Yeah, the history of the Council of Nine is really, really fascinating. So essentially, like you say, it goes back to a guy called Dr. Andreas Puharich. What's very interesting is that he was the American kind of appointed because he did some of the early research into a program that would become MK Ultra. If you haven't heard about that, please do research that. It is a very interesting subject matter on MK Ultra. But one of the things Puharich was into ESP, telekinesis, extrasensory perception, that kind of thing. So he met this essentially what he called an Indian holy man in 1952, that upon immediately meeting Puharich, he knew all about Puharich's life, how he lived, his family, and it just blew him away. So he kind of like, wow, you've got some kind of ESP abilities going on there. This is amazing. So he met him to do what he called a channeling session. So supposedly this Indian holy man, this guy who was in America, he went into a channeling session. His voice changed, his accent changed. And by the end of it, he claimed to have channeled what he called the Council of Nine. The Council of Nine, they supposedly claim to be nine intergalactic civilizations that had come together kind of like in a united federation of planets or civilizations. And historically, throughout history, they had been coming to Earth to elevate humanity in its spiritual level. Now, one of the earliest manifestations of the Council of Nine is what we historically called the Ennead. The Ennead was the 9 major deities of the ancient Egyptian civilization. So Puharich started off with this Indian holy man, and then in the 1960s, he met another group of channelers that then were channeling supposedly the god Ra from the Egyptian Ennead, who was part of this Council of Nine that started making revelations to him. Then later on in the 70s, 80s, you had another individual by the name of Dr. James J. Hurtak, that he wrote a book that's kind of complementary to the one that the other group write in. The other group wrote a book called The Law of One, or the Book of Ra. I can't quite remember the title. Dr. James A. Hurtak, he wrote up all of the channeling sessions that he had with his manifestation of the Council of Nine. And what's interesting is kind of linking it back to what you said, is that the Council of Nine claim, and this is where it gets very, very interesting. The Council of Nine claim that they genetically engineered humanity, with one exception, that they say that Black people or African people are the indigenous first people on Earth, but the aliens, supposedly the entities, did not genetically seed them or genetically enhance them. So what they say is that every other race on planet Earth, with the exception of people of African ancestry, have been genetically enhanced except for them. In the Book of Ra, and this is where it gets even more interesting, that we begin to see now that the phenomena lets the mask slip and begins to show its real self. So then in the Book of Ra, it talks about how the different religious civilizations of Earth and the Council of Nine are very critical of Islam and Muslims. They say that, you know, that maybe Arabs are maybe slightly backward, and this is due to their religion. They also allege, with no historical precedent in place, that allegedly when Muslims ruled over the Holy Lands, that they desecrated Jewish places of worship by spreading them in excrement and feces. Now, this is what this channeling of supposedly Ra was saying. Now, probably the most really in your face, this is the phenomena showing its true self, is in the books of Dr. James A. Hurtak, particularly his book, The Lost Keys of Enoch, where the Council of Nine say very clearly and equivocally that Muslims are the children of the Dark One, meaning the devil or Lucifer, they then say that the Kaaba in Mecca is the center of all chaos in the universe. So here you supposedly have an enlightened, spiritually, intellectually, you know, extraterrestrial civilization, but yet is very xenophobic against Arabs and Islam and people of African descent. Sounds as though it's very human to me rather than very superior spiritual. So I think, you know, the Council of Nine, you know, they use this mythology of ancient Egypt to kind of, and even with Bledsoe, you know, supposedly, you know, this female, you know, entity that has manifested to him, one of the manifestations or one of the guises that it's claimed is to be the ancient Egyptian goddess Hathor. So it kind of all links back into Egypt, and you begin to see now these links that go back. It's truly fascinating.
Yeah, it is, man. And like you said, they, you know, a highly advanced alien race from another star system, yet so concerned with, you know, certain races of people and religions. You know, it something doesn't add up. It's almost like agitated and trying to convince people of something which it may believe for one reason or the other, or to mislead people in some sense. When in reality, I mean, again, the nine, one thing you see is some of the ethical injunctions that they propose for humanity are immoral, if anything, bro. So it's really funny the way it works. Um, but yeah, it is absolutely fascinating, and not only the nine, you see this amongst other, you know, manifestations of these entities and these beings, whether it's the nine, the lady, etc. Um, yeah. Anything else, guys? You want to chime in, share? Anyone else wants to jump on? Please do. Just send a request, and I will approve it. Be great to get everyone's thoughts on this.
Well, I want to say yes that there are too many connections to ancient Egypt. You know that there was a few years back, I think maybe 2 3 years back, a very famous experiencer, young guy in Egypt who had very bad experiences with jinn, and they used to draw the sigils on his body that it's actually ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and drawings of like the same kind of drawings of the ancient Egyptians, uh, like a man standing with a very weird precision of the artwork of the ancient Egyptians. And he was coming on TV. He got very famous that he wants a solution for this. And then he comes back with the old sigils removed and the new sigils, also ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, comes back to his body, but different ones. So there are too many connections about the ancient Egyptian world with the NHIs that we can never uh, stop talking about the connections about it.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. Uh, Abu Salahuddin, we discussed this on the podcast as well. This link to ancient Egypt, which keeps cropping up through history, modern history as well, and even today in the whole UFO phenomenon. This link back to ancient Egypt, these entities, even the lady with Bledsoe and so on, linking herself back to ancient Egypt. Mitch, would you like to share some of the sort of insights you shared on the podcast in regards to what the connections may be, why the appeal to ancient Egypt?
Yeah, I think it's two things really. I think with ancient Egypt, I think more than any of the other earlier civilizations, is that in ancient Egypt we see like a whole society that is dedicated towards the, you know, the worship and the deification of the phenomena. You know, everything the Egyptians did was about the worship of Ra and Osiris and Ptah and all of the other gods. So I think, you know, for the phenomena, it's kind of like that was maybe their peak of, you know, kind of religious worship to them throughout human civilization. I mean, you had the Sumerians before the Egyptians, not that long, but the Sumerian influence hasn't really come down to us to the modern day like the Egyptians have. I mean, we only have to look back at what we would call, you know, the belief structure of the ancient Egyptians. The belief structure of the ancient Egyptians had a heavy influence on the Greeks and the Romans. And when you talk about the Romans, the Romans, you know, had their own trinity. The Greeks had a trinity. The ancient Egyptians had a trinity. But we know that it's under the Roman Empire that, you know, Christianity is heavily influenced by the religion of the Roman Empire. I mean, you're talking about, and I know because I've been to Rome, I've been to St. Peter's Square, where, you know, the Vatican is. You know, that is an area that originally was dedicated to the worshiper, I believe, the god Apollo, who was part of the, you know, the Greek pantheon, but particularly was part of the trinity of the Roman deities. You know, we talk about basilicas. A basilica in ancient Rome essentially was a place of local civil municipal governance. So the effect, you know, the cultural effect of ancient Egypt, you know, lives all the way down to us. Just to give you a very good example, if, you know, any of you unfortunately have been to court at any time, you know, particularly here in the UK, if you look at the stylized wig that they wear in the court system is very, very reminiscent of the pharaonic headdress. Freemasonry is heavily influenced by the esoteric, the occult of ancient Egypt. And we know that many leading members of today's society, politics, religion, have been active members of groups such as the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, that all of them in one form or another are heavily influenced by the, you know, the belief structures of ancient Egypt.
Yeah, thank you, bro. We
Yeah,
got
well,
Alien Light that's joined
yeah,
us. You can go ahead, man.
he's a listener. I think he lost his mic.
His speaker, he's got his hand up. He's got the mic as far as I could see it, unless I'm glitching out.
Yeah, I could see it now. He has the mic.
All right, thank you. Alien Light, did you say?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you say it's okay for Alien Light to
Yes,
speak?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Alien Light, quantum physics right now, what are they telling us right now on quantum physics and the electric magnetic field of light? Anyone familiar with what we're posting and the new evidence right now connected to everything you're speaking of?
No, enlighten us, man. We'd love to hear.
There's light, right? Colors. There are 6 coded colors: potential hydrogen, the photosynthesis colors. They're passing. We exist night and day in the electric magnetic field of this dimension of colors, the living, loving colors we are posing. They're visible through rainbows, northern lights, any deflection of sunlight. We exist in this dimension, but this dimension is ancient, right? It's very cohesive. Quantum physics now. Quantum computers are acknowledging the intelligent, cohesive structure, fine-tuning. The fine-tuning structure exists in the 6 colors or 7 colors, the chakras. We are luminescent light beings, dimensional, right? You have a halo, you have an aura, you have a halo field. Particles, the known particles in quantum physics, quarks, string, any particles that have been identified by colliders or anything that are known are the particles passing through us right now. They are dimensionally forming in and out of the color dimension of the potential hydrogen existence. This existence is very conscious. They are conscious observers, dimensional beings that are cohesively, dimensionally in the existence of this invisible color spectrum. We're posting it. Look at our videos. Anyone can capture it. We're telling people how to capture it. The most simplest way, if you want to see it yourself, is by tapping your eyes, morning sunrise or evening sunset. When any colors flare, this is evidence of the living, loving colors that exist, that now quantum physics is revealing as, yes, you do exist. If you Google it, the electric magnetic field, Max Planck, the first to discover it, to actually expose it, Einstein knew of it. The electric magnetic field is light. It's invisible light, right? Does anyone have any question about this?
Oh, it's very interesting theory. I never heard of it, to be honest. But well, it can be. Well, people say we get the light from the sun, and what is sun made of gases that's exploding, which
It's your existence right now, right? It's your energy, but it is not only your energy. The hydrogen potential color spectrum that is compression Earth is all living biology. It's the fine tuning of the 400 to 700 wavelength. In the 400 to 700 wavelength, all biology is tuned into in different spectrums of the pH range. So it is actually your life right now is tuned into this wavelength, all biology, all measurements. Let me just keep on going. How about telecommunication? Telecommunication cannot exist without the existence of the electric-magnetic field. This is what separates Earth from any planet that we know of. On Earth, you see the rainbow color. You will not see that in any other planet anywhere. The rainbow color spectrum that we're speaking of is the cohesive, intelligent. It is not random. This is intelligent light signaling to Earth, only to Earth, as we know. No other planet has it. Mars, the moon, nowhere. But it's intelligent. You are cohesively tuning into this field and transmitting and receiving. In the most subconscious parts of your mind, which is your heart, and all subconscious behavior receives the information from the quantum field. Intelligence is communicating in this subtle, intelligent, conscious field.
may I ask you?
When you receive the subtle
So, sorry,
downloads,
Mr.
this is
Light.
this.
Just to give people more understanding in a from practical perspective, can you let us know more explanation about the? I can see the videos on your profile where there is rainbow lights around statues of, I don't know, deities, or I'm not so sure what's that, or entities. So can you please explain to us what, like a statue of E.T. and a statue of Jesus? Can you explain to us what are you exactly doing here?
Yes, thank you so much. It is the living, loving, and that's what we post. It is unconditional. The universe seems to be transmitting unconditional geometry of love. It's encoded in plant life, nature. Love is the most cosmological signal that seems to be. So the deflection of maybe what you're talking about is captured by deflection angle momentum of a certain deflection material. And it forms these geometries of like what looks like angels, crosses in different colors. This is so amazing. No one is creating this. This is the cosmic universe somehow forming these geometric patterns that must exist. And that's what I mentioned. As I mentioned, the 400 to 700 wavelength is the Fibonacci golden mean ratio, how patterns are formed. So it's all connected to this. But so what we're talking about here is two forms of light that we are interacting with. The cohesive form, which is the potential hydrogen form in water molecule, and disbursement of color dimensions. The disbursement color dimensions are well known. People that take any hallucinatives, ayahuasca, any hallucinative, you will see those flashing lights. If you take LSD or any kind of the flashing lights that you will experience are the disbursement color dimension. The intelligent color formation is in the pH potential hydrogen well-tuned stacking color, which is the photosynthesis colors that you see in pH strips or any photosynthesis color spectrum. That's the cohesive formation of the existence of this. So there's much strange stuff going on here. These identities will transmit in an invisible radiation color dimension different geometric patterns. If you learn how to angle your camera or your deflected device in certain sunlight or radiation detection, LED light radiation, these identities appear, or the consciousness of intelligence can be captured in a radiation form.
Can
Sounds
I ask
very
a question?
interesting.
Conscious
Can I ask a
radiation
question if you don't
transmission.
mind? Can I ask a question if you
Oh,
don't
yes,
mind?
please.
What exactly is it that you're talking about? You've told me how it can manifest. You've said about how to record its manifestation, but what is it exactly? Are we euphemistically talking about some intelligence that we could call God? What exactly is it?
You know, this is something that we all need to learn from ours. You know, and I'm glad for thank you for the intelligence. You know, because I'm so much trying to understand. All I can say is, you know, there are many, but now I'm not sure if you're familiar with Professor Michael Levitt and people that are in biology study. And a lot of us, and not only in biology, quantum physics, to answer your question, it does seem to be directing towards an intelligence of a divine cosmology, ancient intelligence that is transmitting or not transmitting, in contact with the dimensions of us are now. Is it spiritual? It seems to be. It seems to have a of intelligence, but also spiritual intention because of the history of what we know about this. If you speak to any one of us that truly speaks of true ancient intelligence, love is the number one signal that comes across. That is found in nature. It is found in everywhere. So there must be the signal is in that dimension. So what can we say? We cannot exclude spirituality, not necessarily religion, but spirituality. And in the spirituality realm, it is well known, one of the most hidden codes of this ancient and most ancient is the six colors. They didn't want us to know. Now it's revealing that these colors are of an intelligent dimension that your frequency, our frequency, is all tuned into. And so the more we interact with the consciousness of this dimension, it changes the perception to the newer fourth and fifth dimension of our existence, which is what we are now in the discussion of the existence of colors that we cannot see, that AI confirmed that we all see. We swim, we live, we exist in a rainbow color dimension of many, many, many colors. Ways to capture it so that you can eliminate the doubt. CD, any CD, if you look at a CD or any deflective material and it presents colors, that is right there evidence that the colors exist that we cannot see, right?
Yeah, I think
Do we
Okay,
understand?
maybe
so what you're saying is that these colors exist. These colors are sentient. So I'll ask the question again. are these colors, are these aspects of the one, is the one God?
Yes, yeah, I would say so, you know? I would really because of the constant loving intelligence. The 400 to 700 is your heart. It's all of our hearts are tuned into this specific wavelength that is detectable by EKG, right?
Okay,
It's a cosmological tuning of love, you know?
okay, so if you're saying it's God, then why is now God using a different manner to reveal himself to humanity that, with all due respect, has never been known through history? The communication between God and essentially us as the creation of God has always been via messengers, angels, and divine revelation. So why would God need now to change the methodology of revelation? Can you explain to me why God has changed that?
No, you know, I actually agree with that. It may not be the direct communication of the one God, but it could be a manifestation of the many gods representing the dimensions. It's kind of introducing the many dimensions of many gods to the conclusion of the one God, you know, or representations of that dimension is what we are first beginning to experience. And just even acknowledgement of the color spectrum that now AI, I'm speaking to many serious scientists right now. These are physicists that cannot deny any one of them. You ask the living electric magnetic spectrum. That's the only question you have to ask. Does it exist? And they will say, yes, it exists. And it's a color spectrum, night and day, exists throughout the universe. The electric magnetic spectrum is throughout the universe, but it's the part of the colors and the formation of some kind of spiritual existence here on Earth that is nowhere else. There is nowhere else on any planet observing, and this is what it is. In quantum physics, we call it the color shifts. We're looking for dimensional existence, the distance between planets, the actual weight mass of the planet and any conscious existence. And so this is what we're searching for, and only Earth. It is only the beauty of the Earth. When you see a rainbow, when you see a cohesive light from the sunlight, this is an intelligent, cohesive dimension that only exists on Earth, and is of conscious intelligence. It is not random. The frequency waves, I'll just speak of like your pH. Your pH is 7.4. 7.4 is a measurement of the electrical voltage in a fluid solution, which is approximately 760 millivolts of electrons flowing of energy in the potential hydrogen measurement. This is a very strict measurement. If our pH was to go off or up and down, you can Google this on your medical report. You're not having a good day. You're clinically actually dead on the up and down range of your potential hydrogen measurement, your pH, right?
Okay, right.
This
So
indicates intelligence.
okay. So we understand what you're saying about this, but with all due respect to you, and I do really do mean this, the Quran already essentially has answered what you're saying. You went from saying it's God to gods and aspects of gods, but manifested into gods. But one of the things the Quran explicitly says, it says if there was many gods, they would be fighting amongst themselves, similar to what we see in the Hindu pantheon. But yet we don't see that. Why are these gods that supposedly are out there are not fighting amongst themselves? So that means then there is one divine being that reveals himself to humanity. And the problem with what you're saying is to do with colors and being aware of colors. But surely God's message to humanity should not need an awareness of colors, but rather what it needs is an awareness of God's existence and how to recognize that existence, and should not be then confusing in a one sense to say, I'm a God, but I manifest as gods. But then that is no different than from what the ancient Egyptians were saying, that claimed to be monotheists, but then said that that God manifested in many different forms. Why would God need to manifest his attribute of creation into a separate form, or his attribute of love into a separate form? With all, it just doesn't make sense, with all due respect, my friend.
Well, I mean, I can only include intelligence, divine, ultimate intelligence that we cannot even fathom. The divine intelligence that is in geometry, right? Not geometry, biology. I'm sorry. All biology is receiving this into dimension, including the ocean. Ocean are equally in the color spectrum as well. But the bioluminescent dimensions are everywhere, including ocean. So please include the diversity, the complexity of intelligence required to create life on Earth and to maintain life. Right now, all life is tuned and receiving these electrical waves. Not only waves, the patterns, the very existence, all of nature. The color green, we'll speak of the color green. Color green is a gamma color. It is one of the most powerful colors of existence, but all of life, food on Earth is in that color compression existence. No oxygen, the photosynthesis color spectrum of this specific color spectrum. The color red is our blood, the many different forms of that dimension. So there's a lot to try to understand the complexity of intelligence that guards or the gods. So when we speak of this, can we speak? We try are many divine, intelligent beings that have the intelligence of life for the sake of life, to survive life, and to give love and kindness to life. These are the survivors of life, and they come in different forms. Is there one ultimate God that is the leader of this life loving intelligence? That's a question, right?
So alien, that is a very interesting point. But so on this, we would say, just as a retort, that what you're mentioning, we will refer to them as signs. They're the signs of the divine, right? Now, to go a step further and to say that it's multiple gods as opposed to one, is the stretch. And I would say that if you acknowledge that God, when you talk about God,
Sorry.
no, no, sure.
Yeah,
Just to finish the point, that if when we talk about God, now I'm sure everyone here, when we think about God, we have a certain notion that appears in our mind that we're talking about a being that's all powerful, able to do all things, is not limited by anything else, is not dependent upon anything else. Now, such a being, conceptually, if we think about it, is able to do all things. This being can create all these magnificent aspects of life, including the color spectrum you're speaking about, without any problem, without having to depend on anything else. So we would say, if you're talking about the higher being, the creator being, the one that's able to do these things, then we would say that there's no need for a second or a third or a fourth. I mean, you can apply Occam's razor here. I mean, it's the simplest and the most cohesive, coherent explanation. But nevertheless, what you're mentioning, as far as the light spectrum and all of these fascinating things, are fascinating, and we would just say that they're the signs of the true intelligence, the highest, the creator of all things. And I'm still struggling. I'd love to hear from you. Like, what would be the reasons to assert or assume that there's more than one, just because there's more than one color in the spectrum? And I feel we're speaking about just the visible spectrum right now of light. There's the invisible spectrum as well. Regardless, the visible and invisible, the whole electromagnetic spectrum, we would say is a sign of the all-powerful creator that's able to create that and everything else in existence. And there's no need to or reason to speculate that there's more than one. I think that's what we're getting at when we're sort of positing these points to you. But nevertheless, fascinating points, Alien. And again, it just shows that all of this creation, everything that exists, it's a stretch to say that it's just emerged from nothing or that it's created itself or by chance. There definitely is something, a higher being behind all of this.
And I think on Abu Salahdin's point, which was interesting, which referring to the verse that, you know, if there was more than one, again, everyone can conceptualize this and think about this. If there was more than one God, everything will be in chaos. And that makes sense, even from a limited human perspective. As human beings, we understand the value of authority. I mean, how many head teachers of a school or how many captains of a ship? There's always one in charge, because we know if there's more than one in charge, it results in chaos. And that's just us limited human beings. Now, if we just extend that out and by greater reason say, well, okay, what about the creator of all things? Imagine there being more than one all-powerful. How would that even make sense? You know, they wouldn't. If you say that, well, there's more than one creator and they always agree with one another, and that allows for a cohesive universe, well, then I would say that shows dependency. That shows that they're having to agree with each other, means that one's will is being overpowered by the other and the other's by a third, to maintain this coherence and cohesiveness. And that dependence would mean that we're no longer talking about an all-powerful God. We're talking about dependent beings, and that's not who we conceive God to be. So it makes sense from all perspectives. Can I just very quickly add something, Brother Imran?
Um,
Yes. And like you say, you know, colors are signs of God. They are not God. Well, for me to recognize that God, what if I'm blind and I can't see those colors? Does that mean I'm devoid of God's mercy, of God's love? There's a very good example from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that there was a blind man who accepted Islam, became a very good Muslim. So the message of God should not be dependent upon something other than in a sense of I need a color to pass a message. The message can be passed on from revelation as it was passed on to that blind man at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And I just have a problem that it seems to be, it's very, I have to be able to recognize colors and see colors to somehow connect in with the divine, which, you know, how does that affect or leave blind people, I wonder? I think we've lost Alien. He lost his connection or something. Afak, is he still on? Can I not see him?
I don't see him. I've been trying to see.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, probably lost connection.
Okay, so oh, 1 second. I think we've got a request. Oh, he's back. Let me approve it. 1 second. But what we'll do is once we've heard from Alien, we'll start wrapping things up, guys. It's about 11:30. So yeah, I mean, maybe we can start sort of summarizing stuff and bringing it to a close.
I think that's perfect. Yeah, let's do that. It's getting late over here as well.
I'll just finish with this alien life, please. I'll just leave it with this. And if you speak to scientists, which is a more of the center that I'm into, they would not want to speak about this. They will not speak about religion.
Yes.
Right? They will cut you short and say, I don't want to talk no more. I will leave this discussion. I'm a scientist, I'm a physicist. I cannot go on your spiritual dogma. So here's what we're looking at, right? We're looking at evidence that every form of intelligence, the intelligence shows a spiritual dimension. But in quantum physics, we know, and if anyone that's listening wants to understand the reality, I'll repeat it again. You exist in a color geometry right now. To extract you from that color geometry, whether you can see, some people are blind, but that doesn't mean that your electrical energy is not going through you. That electrical energy is color. Please, I'm trying to communicate with intelligent people that understand what alien light is posting. This is real. It's intelligent, it's conscious, it is spiritual. It is not in a dogma of religion. Religion can become mind, I don't even want to say how bad it is. But if you understand intelligence, maybe you can survive, you know? Thank you so much for Alien Light.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Alien. It was fascinating, like we said, you know, to bring in to light the color spectrum and certain aspects of it, which are recently being discovered. But the point on, yeah, fair enough. I mean, you wanted to go into the discussion of
theology and religion yourself. That's why we entertained it. But I agree, when it comes to science, scientists, generally speaking, won't delve into theology or philosophy, which is fair point because that's not their realm or their scope. Similarly, most theologians won't delve into the science. But I think these conversations are good because they bridge all of these different worlds. And especially talking about the UFO UAP phenomenon, one of the things I think that we can appreciate that it requires these different perspectives and lenses to really fully understand what's going on. It's not just and we've seen the struggle with, purely scientists approaching this phenomenon and trying to understand it, and it's leaving them bamboozled in most cases. So it requires a multidisciplinary approach. And I think it's only a positive thing to bring these different worlds into the discussion and seeing where they merge with one another. And yeah, so just thank you for coming on. But yeah, anything, Abu Salahuddin, Sam, IREP, Sam, other Sam, anything you guys want to sort of share before we wrap up?
No, I
Um,
was just fascinated with Abu Salah ad-Din's idea about ancient Egypt, but I was wondering regarding that we already have a society in India which is already dedicated to that. What seems to be the same entities. However, it doesn't seem to be seen from the looks of the world perspective as the superior one to be leading the cutting edge things. Even though they speak about the Vimanas, and maybe this is for another space.
Yeah, maybe next week we can dive into that, bro. I think that'll be a good topic to bring into play.
Yeah, just remind us and we'll add that as a topic. I think that's pretty good.
Abu Salahuddin, anything you want to share, bro?
Yeah, really fascinating. I would just really say for any non-Muslims that have tuned in today, I'd really really say it's really good. And I think that the aspect here with this whole phenomena is being very open-minded and investigating and essentially remembering, that we should be looking at it from a technological perspective, but there is or science or rationality. But there's a really classical scholar from West Africa. His name was Sheikh Othman Dan Fodio, and I really love reading his stuff because he kind of talks about where we are now as a society, as a civilization. And he said something so profound. He said, science can bring you to the realization that God exists, but only faith allows you to understand how he exists. And I think that's something that we need to have, that very fine balance between empirical evidence, rationality, investigation, and then to understand that there are some aspects of this phenomenon that are very spiritual. And perhaps the only way we will truly understand them is understanding from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. And just echoing that point, I think such spaces are important, and it's your attendance is valued because it shows that people are willing to listen and engage. And it has to be a multidisciplinary approach when it comes to this phenomenon. And I think with most things in the world, to fully understand things, the how and the why of things, another thing which is understood, for example, by the philosophers of science is science will lead you to the how, but the why behind it, the metaphysical aspects of those realities, it would have no say in because it's just beyond the scope of the scientific method. And I think one of the things that's really affected people in a negative way in modernity is this notion that science is the only way to truth, and that it leads to all truth completely and comprehensively, which it doesn't. And any philosopher of science, regardless of their background, would admit this, that science is a brilliant tool. It works phenomenally well within its sphere, but it has limits. It's limited to the observable world, to our senses, things we can pick up through our senses, observe, study, and then make hypotheses and conclusions upon. That being said, there are other domains or routes to knowledge or truth, which are beyond science. And it's a case of bringing everything together and try to understand the world holistically, which is important. And I believe people here recognize. So anyway, thank you guys for coming on. Sally, Sacred, Suzanne, thank Sarah, Solar A, LFC4, William B, William V, Elijah A, Joe, and everyone else that I can't see on the screen. Thank you guys for jumping on today, staying with us through the whole session. We're going to try to do these more regularly, try to do maybe every Friday night, 9 p.m., and be a bit more consistent with it. It'll be really good to get you guys on, more of you guys on, to share your thoughts as well. And yeah, anything else, Afaq, you want to say before you take us out, bro? Okay, I think Afaq is gone.
No, I'm sorry. I was just connecting up, but yeah, it's fine. We can wrap it up. I just want to say thank you all for coming, and if you haven't, please make sure to follow our page, follow Imran. We're try to post regularly, but yeah, just do that, and we'll see you guys next week.
Take care, guys. Good night, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Awesome.
Wa alaikum
Take
salam.
care.